Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Wine Women Words. There is daylight in my room right now, so it's not our usual Thursday night episode. We have a brunch episode, but we are still drinking wine. We have our much anticipated January Book of the Month author with us, Stuart Turton, to
Hi.
The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. And thank you so much for joining us. We have been talking about this book and texting each other and trying to figure out the killer the whole time that we were reading it, and we weren't even close.
Yay!
Completely wrong.
Yay! But in a fair way, right? Not in a sort of like somebody walked through the door at the last minute and you were like, I've never met this character before.
Right? Yeah, that was, I think I might have to scroll back through our texts and find the text message that I was like, the last 40 pages are like, oh, you think you have me figured out? Nope. Mm-hmm. We're just going
to be honest, the book did that to me first. The book was like, by the time I got to that point, I initially had all my conclusions in one big Agatha Christie style 200-page roundup at the end of the book. Mm-hmm. And it just didn't work. It was so leaden and horrible at the end that I had to sort of cut the endings up a little bit. So I moved a lot of the revelations further down the book. So that sense of being like, you think you've got this figured out and then it changes. That actually wasn't my initial intention. It just was the way the book kind of had to be written. So it did that to me as well, if that's any consolation.
That is, it kind of makes me feel a little bit better that there isn't someone out there who is like that evil genius mastermind to throw that many plot twists in at some point, because there's no hope for me as a writer if someone can actually put together that many plot twists intentionally.
Oh, my friend, if there's hope for me as a writer, there's hope for everybody as a writer, believe me.
So I guess the very first and very obvious question, which I kind of touched on before, is there a room somewhere in your house with the index cards of all of your characters and like red yarn connecting all the plot twists and who does what to who to help you?
Yeah, so I used to have a study. Well, I say study. I used to have a corner of my bedroom, and I had like 2 walls and they were covered in Post-it notes. And they were kind of like, but they were more actually themes. So that was like things about, you know, the story I was trying to tell, but they were like sort of background motifs that I wanted to weave in. So that's what I used the Post-it notes for. But the actual planning was done on an Excel spreadsheet, which was like, I had every 2 minutes of every character's day in the house mapped out. So even the background characters, I knew where they were for every 2 minutes. So I could make sure that because I wanted the entire book to be fair, I didn't want anybody to sort of teleport across the house suddenly to be able to overhear something that they needed to hear. So yeah, I've got this massive spreadsheet every 2 minutes, and then I overlaid that onto a map of the house and the grounds that I drew, so I knew where everyone could be and how they would get around and what they would be doing. So it took about 3 months of planning to get there in the end. And then even as I say, like when I got into the writing of it, there were things that needed to be adjusted or things that were planned forward. Suddenly there was too many action bits happening in the middle of the novel, or the exposition was like a big expedition dump that lasted for, like, as I say, 100 pages. So that had to be altered and rejiggered around. The entire thing never killed me, I swear.
It paid off in the end because it really is a well planned out book where it felt like a literary machine, I guess, if you will, because every little piece fit together. There wasn't anything that was loose. So when you said the Excel spreadsheet, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, because there was no way in hell I would be able to keep track of all of that on my own. I mean, doing 2 different plots, so it's like, what?
I know. Well, to be honest, I didn't, even with the planning, I never sort of kept up with it. So what I would do is I wrote the first draft through. There was about, to put this in perspective, there must have been about 30 something drafts of this, and they were all titled rubbish book, #1, rubbish book, #2, like 30 something. And I just kept, it's kind of like sifting it through, right? You're trying to flatten bits out. So you'd be like, oh, I've written that. Okay, that doesn't make sense. Or I forgot to connect that to that. Okay, I'll put that in. And then your next draft, you're like, oh God, I've completely forgot to mention that thing has happened, and then okay, you need to be feeling this about that, so I've got to do that, and then you realize, okay, my reader probably hasn't kept up with that plot line, so I need to, introduce it or find a way of bringing it back into the book subtly, so people are just up to date with where we are constantly. So it was just that. It was just kind of sifting through and just writing, rewriting, editing, cutting, rewriting over and over and over again. So even that first draft, when I looked at my plan and made all of that plan into plot in the book, that was a year and a half into a 3-year process.
Mm-hmm. You see, Michelle, we were talking about this before the show. She said, because she's in the process of writing a first draft for a novel.
Yay!
I know. Congratulations for her. She's almost there. And she's like, after the second draft, I think I'm going to go query it. And I started laughing at her. And it took me 7 drafts of my novel. So, yeah, I always laugh at you, dear. It's part of our relationship. And you laugh at me. But yeah, hearing the 30 drafts, I feel like that's something that's inspiration for those that are in the trenches trying to write, their novels.
Oh, I mean, it's one of those
dedication.
Things. I can absolutely understand why you're like 2 drafts in, I'm going to query it. I think you can, like, depending on the novel. I absolutely do believe you can get there in 2 drafts. So some people probably can get there in 1 draft. I think it depends on the story you're trying to tell, like, and what you need to do with it. And the way I write is really, I find it in the edit, it's almost like a film for me. I put all my scenes down and then I edited them together in different ways, and I kind of find the story in that edit. So it requires that amount of redrafting, to the point where for my second book, I've had to build that into the process to be like, yeah, I can write the first draft in a year, but actually it's going to take me a year of editing to get what I need at the end of it. So yeah, I mean, if you could get your novels queried and sent off after 2 drafts, that would be my personal dream. That I could take like 6 months holiday and just go off and do other things. It would be amazing.
But as they say, all the writing is in the rewriting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me especially, I write garbage the first time around.
Which I think all first drafts admittedly should be garbage the first time around, because you're just spewing ideas out into the paper.
Yeah, there have definitely been days where I'm like, this is awful. Like, oh my God, just get through this scene and wrap it up for the day. But I just want to like get the words out, and then I can fix the words later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what that's the sort of leeway I gave myself in my second book. So the first one, I put so much pressure on myself, thinking that it had to be perfect the first time around, and that if it didn't come out perfect, it wouldn't. I mean, none of it's perfect, but you know what I mean? I couldn't get it to the point that I wanted it to be later on. Whereas with the second one, I'd give myself a lot more leeway, just to be like, well, that's rubbish, but just get your words out today and you'll be okay tomorrow. And that's been really, really nice to sort of have that weight off my shoulders. Because the first book was like, to put it into context, when I decided to write the first book, me and my wife were living in Dubai, and we were travel journalists there. So we were living in this beautiful apartment. We were earning like relatively good money, tax-free in Dubai, and we were traveling for 2 weeks of every month. We were going on holiday. And to write this book, I realized I had to move back to England. I couldn't work full time because I needed time to write the book. So I went freelance. So I only worked 3 days a week and then spent the rest on the book. So we'd gone from this nice apartment to this really crappy apartment in London, above a children's nursery of all things. So I'd be writing during the day, hearing like children screaming downstairs. It was cold, it was grey, it was rainy, we didn't have any money. Suddenly we weren't going on holiday anymore. So there was that sort of like all that pressure as well to sort of make sure the book would work.
Mm-hmm.
Just go. Sorry, my wife is about to stroll through the shop. This is just beautiful live.
That's the great part about the live shows. And I mean, shout out to the writers' spouses, because I mean, they're in the trenches right along with the writer.
That's my wife saying she agrees in the background.
Yes. I mean, I know for me, my husband had to put up with like massive dishes like piling up and dirty laundry, and finally like, oh screw it, I'm just going to do my own laundry from now on, just because it was like, okay, you're writing, I get it. But yeah, shout out to the spouses of writers. But I want to go back to the source where the idea came from, because I've been saying a lot that to me this feels like Downton Abbey meets Agatha Christie meets Quantum Leap, and I was really excited when you referenced Quantum Leap at the very end of the book, because I was like, I knew it. Where did the inspiration for this come from?
Terror. Complete and utter terror. I wanted to write, all I ever wanted to do was write an Agatha Christie story, like an Agatha Christie style murder mystery. So this is not a locked room, but that was my initial idea, the kind of like drawing room, golden age mystery with all that good stuff. And I knew I wanted a lot of the Agatha Christie tropes in it. So I wanted the house, I wanted the cast of characters who were all faintly grotesque, who all had secrets. I wanted the isolated manor house, so that was one of the Agatha Christie tropes. I've never seen Downton Abbey, so that's one of the strange things. I've never watched that show, but for me, it was the Agatha Christie influence. Like, she did the big houses, and she did the guests, and she did the downstairs, upstairs thing. So that was my inspiration for that. And then I sat down to write one when I was 21. I'm 38 now, to put it in context. So when I was 21, I sat down to write my Agatha Christie mystery, and it was just awful. It was it was really bad. I honestly, genuinely believe of all the works that have been written down in history by anybody who could not read or not write, mine was still the worst. It was, and I just didn't get there. And I spent 3 months or 6 months or something, I can't remember. But I just working on this thing, and like day to day realizing that it was bad and it was getting worse, and I was lumbering through it, and I realized at the end what I was doing was remixing these tropes. I wasn't doing anything with them. I wasn't elevating them. I wasn't mixing them together in interesting new ways. I was just sort of like making some mad mashup of Agatha Christie novels. And that was a terrible idea. And obviously it's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to write a novel which I felt personally I could be proud of, that could sit on a bookshelf next to one of hers and I would be proud of. So I had to go away. I was just like, well, this isn't working. What am I missing? And I realized what I was missing was a genuinely good idea of my own. I didn't have anything to add to what she'd already put out there. So I figured, well, until I've got that idea, I can't touch this. I can't do it. So I walked away from it thinking it would be a week or a month or a year outside. And honestly, I came back to it 12 years later. Like, I was thinking about this for 12 years, trying to come up with an idea that I could stick in the center of an Agatha Christie novel that would make it my own. And it was actually when we were in Dubai, as I was talking about earlier, I was on a plane and we were going somewhere, and it was just, my mind just drifted back to this idea as it'd been doing every year since I was 21, and the Groundhog Day stuff and the Quantum Leap stuff had just kind of congealed over the top of it. Mm-hmm. It was just kind of this entire mad sci-fi Agatha Christie sandwich was just there. And I was just like, that could work. And it seemed so obvious when I came up with the idea. You know the way these things do. It seemed so obvious that I figured I'd watched it or I'd read it and I was stealing it from somebody else. That's what it felt like to me, because it was just so complete in my head. So I dashed off on the plane. I dashed off 2,000 words, a sort of proof of concept kind of chapter. And that was garbage as well, but it kind of proved it would work. And then I got off the plane and immediately Googled it to see where I'd stolen this idea from. And it just wasn't anywhere. Clearly nobody had actually done it. So I was like, okay, cool. Well, I've got to write this now, because all that will happen is it's such an obvious idea that somebody else will come up with it and write it in a week or a month. And I kept writing. So as I was writing this novel and as it drew out, because I told my wife it would take a year, and then it took nearly 3. And every sort of week or month, I'd be checking the internet, being like, someone's going to write this in a minute. Someone's going to write this in a minute. And a film came out. Did you ever see, there was a Tom Cruise film called Edge of Tomorrow or Live, Die, Repeat or something. They changed the names around the world. It's the one where he's a soldier and he keeps repeating the day over and over. It's basically Groundhog Day.
Oh, yeah. I can't think of the name of it, but I think it is Live, Die, Repeat. But I know what movie you're talking about.
Yeah, so when that came out, I nearly had a heart attack. Let's put it that way. I was just like, so I saw the synopsis of it and was like, oh no, someone's done it. But thankfully, there's nothing in my book. But yeah, that was sorry, long-winded answer, but that was the inspiration for it. Wow.
And one thing, so you not only had to write the murder mystery and create these characters and build these characters, but I've always really admired a writer's ability to create distinct voices. When you're writing from multiple points of view, you have to create different voices for the characters. And I've never tried writing different points of view, so I've never tried doing it. But you not only had to have a consistent voice for Aiden through the whole story, no matter which host that they were in, but then you had to create different voices for the hosts that he had already been in or the host that he was going into. So did you, once you start creating them, did you already have them mapped out in your mind, or did the characters kind of create themselves?
They were actually all functions of the plot in a strange way. So I knew, for example, that I needed to start the novel. It was an interesting thing. I wanted to start the novel with a character that, because I knew, sorry, I'm sort of putting this together, but basically because I knew that my character would jump through bodies, I knew I had an opportunity to start with a character that you would never normally start a novel with, because I didn't have to live with him for the entire novel. So I wanted to do something that was slightly repulsive or slightly not the protagonist you typically get in one of these novels. So initially I was going to go even with something like Darby, who was like really terrible, awful character, but would be, and then I realized that would be too jarring, too off-putting, but I put him in the body of a coward to start off with. So Belle is the coward. But again, that's not a character I think you typically see in one of these style novels. It's not someone you start with. But again, because I had the freedom of not living with him for an entire novel, I was like, well, what the hell? So that's kind of what I started. And then it got to the point where I needed a character to kind of slow down and talk more and think things through. So that meant he had to be quite clever. But also I wanted to physically slow him down. So I made this morbidly obese banker, Ravencourt, and that's kind of how he came about. He was a function of the plot. After that, I needed someone to speed the novel up again. And we wanted some action because we'd had a lot of talking and we'd had a lot of sort of like thoughtful, and a lot of philosophy comes in at that point as well. So I put him in, I made a very rash and stupid young man who we can dash around in and get into scrapes and do daft things with. So it kept being that. Every time I needed to slow the novel down, I would create a character I ended up being in a lawyer, Charles Dance, who was again an old man. So he was quite reflective about his age. But again, that was a symptom of actually, I just need someone who's quite slow. Like I need somebody who can only maybe go between 2 or 3 points in the house, or he needs to have this type of conversation. So his skill would be in having these types of conversation. And out of that, these characters began to bubble up. So, you know, you've got a morbidly obese character. So what better for me than a banker? What better than from somebody whose entire life is greed? And that sort of just those little metaphors started to come together really neatly. And then I wanted things within their personalities that would challenge Aiden, because Aiden obviously starts off with amnesia, doesn't know who he is. So he's got to find himself in opposition to his hosts. What do they do that he doesn't like? What do they do that he does like? And through that, I can tell you who Aiden is without ever having to say, this is what Aiden is as a character. So first of all, yeah, physically, they were plot points. And then I layered over that with habits and quirks and personality types that would challenge Aiden in some way. And through them, he would find himself. And yesterday, I just built them up and built them up that way. It was like sediment, just sort of like gradually layering up. And then anytime I felt they felt indistinct, I would go and root out another thing that would define them. So that's how the artist comes around at the end. He was throughout it, he felt like quite an indistinct character until I found this job for him, this thing specifically that he could do. And out of that, his entire personality began to flow. But yeah, and then in short, sorry, it was an arsehole to write. That was the hardest thing. Of all the stuff, the murder mystery, the time travel shenanigans, the quantum leapy stuff, the actual balance of the personality, Aiden's personality with the personality of his host, that was the thing I was tweaking about a week before the proofs went out to publishers. It was just a nightmare.
So basically, you were the plague doctor playing around with all these different personalities to figure out what the right combination would be to help support Aiden through the novel.
Nice. Yeah, that was really good. Yeah, that was exactly that. I never made that connection, but that's exactly what was happening. Yeah, I've effectively asserted myself into the novel. Yeah, it was, but it very much was the entire thing. I mean, to the point of there was an extra character at the end of it in the planning, who just didn't work in the writing, and then he was like, he's got an entire. I mean, in my first what, 20 rubbish drafts or something. He's in there. Like, you get to this extra character and he's the one who sorts it all out at the end, and he just didn't work. But yeah, again, my Plague Doctor would have just like bumped him off viciously, just killed him because he wasn't working. He wasn't going to help Aiden escape.
Now, and so I was very meticulous while reading this novel because I was determined that I was going to figure out who the murderer was. So I don't know if you can see, I have
Right.
Post-its like throughout. These are characters, and then eventually I did stop because I couldn't stop reading long enough to mark everything. But these were the days. So I have like day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, and then these are plot twists. And then
is that all the plot twists I had in there? It's like 5 plot twists.
No, I stopped. I lost my little like pad of Post-its. Number 1,
Right.
find them, and number 2, I didn't want to stop reading long enough to be like, okay, so this is happening now, and I have to. I was very determined to figure this out, and I did.
I admire your dedication there. I mean, that's almost as much planning as I did.
Meanwhile, I spilled wine on my book, so.
Oh.
That's okay. It wasn't too bad. It was towards the top, so I could still read it just fine. So it wasn't too bad.
It's kind of a fitting metaphor for the entire thing, though. It kind of works quite nice.
Right?
On both ends, you have like the meticulous planning and then the creative inspiration.
And the kind of just like, screw it, let's just throw it all down on the floor and see what happens. That was definitely a part of it as well.
So,
Yeah.
And now, so Diana is super proud about her chess piece.
I am. Before we get into that, let's do a quick little spoiler alert announcement, because I think at this point in the show we're going to start getting into spoilers. So if people are still listening and they didn't already heed the warnings in the show notes and stuff, there are spoilers. We're talking about everything, and at this point, listen at your own risk. But yeah, I was super proud of myself that I was able to figure out the chess stuff, because I only know a little bit of chess. I tried to learn, and I just didn't really have the follow through. But I was like, wait, that's not a castle tower. That's a chess piece. I know that's a chess piece, and I had to go look up what the chess pieces did, and then like after that, like every other they were like the breadcrumbs, I feel like, throughout the story. I'm assuming you were into chess, and this was something that you purposely obviously put in there.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's one of those, it's a motif, right? Like, it was Agatha Christie. There's a lot of chess pieces and chess boards and chess references in Christie novels. So yeah, I play, but not to any great level. But it was more the fact that from the beginning, it felt like, at very least, I had to have a chessboard in the book. That's where it started. And it's just cool, right? Like, iconically, a chessboard, chess pieces are cool. And then as things started to develop, I realized it became a really nice way of linking things. And then as my brain generally runs to, I was like, well, if you're going to feature it more than once, you can start doing something more interesting with it than just maybe talking about it. Maybe you can start using this as a clue. Maybe they can start being code words for things. Maybe you could start using them to signal messages, like, and then all that stuff. And then again, you suddenly realize that you've made your book even more complicated than it was 10 minutes ago, when you're like, oh, crap, I've got the idea now, I've got to follow through on it, even though it's going to be an week of work. So yeah, no, congratulations on figuring it out, because I think you got to it quite early doors, like before it's even. But yeah, it was a thing that I wanted just to build up and give people. Also, like, you can use stuff like that, like red herrings. So I wanted people to feel smart reading the book, that they could work things out, that they would see things coming. But then every time you work something out, I would just go slightly left or I'd go slightly right again and just trip you up again, or let you work something out, but then use that knowledge against you. It was always a sense that the entire book is a game. Like, the entire book is a chess game. Like, it's you versus me. We are playing. All the pieces are out in full view. You know everything that I know, or you know everything my protagonist knows, I should say. And you know how all these pieces move. You know how Ravencourt can move. You know how Dance can move, how Derby can move. You know the way my character knows, and the way my protagonist, you know their personality traits. You kind of know how they're going to begin to react to things as we go along. So the entire thing felt like that to me. It was just like, yeah, let's play a game. Let's have some fun. And if you get there before me, that's absolutely brilliant. It means I've done my job. I've layered my clues. You're perfectly allowed to win this book before I get there. but it's so much more fun if you don't.
Yeah, and I thought I had won it, like figured out an ending, because the ending I thought it was that I thought that, oh gosh, Anna was actually Evelyn and Aiden was somebody who was going to be saving her. So I'm like, this is totally the way it's going to end. And yeah, I was completely wrong. The ending still threw me for a loop, even though I could see where I was going. It just it threw me for such a loop that when I was finishing reading it, my husband was like, "When are you hungry? You know, are you hungry? Are you ready for dinner?" And I was maybe 60 pages from finishing. And I like counted the pages, and I told him I'll be ready to eat once we get to this many pages. After 60 pages, I'll be ready to go to dinner. Just because I was like, I had to figure out, see what was happening, and realize how incredibly wrong I was, even though I was following the bread pieces.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things. Oh, sorry, please.
No, you go.
I was just going to say that one of the interesting things actually about the ending was that the way the ending, like everything else, was very iterative. But from the beginning, I kind of sat down with myself and tried to sort of distance myself from the book and think, as a reader, what would be the endings I would expect. Like, so the most obvious one to me was the time travel ending, which was that the book ends where it begins. So you end with the same event you've seen at the beginning. And I ruled that out straight away. That was like, I just crossed that off because I was trying to always surprise people and keep people on the back foot. And hopefully in a nice way, rather than just the sort of like pulling surprises out of absolutely nowhere or not paying them off. So I ruled that one out. But the one you just suggested with Evelyn, somebody investigating Evelyn down the character and Evelyn actually being somebody. When I took it to publishers, that was one of the amendments that one of the publishers suggested when I went to a meeting with them, that they wanted that rather than the ending I had. And we had to walk away from that meeting because I wasn't willing to do that. Because again, it was an ending that I thought people would expect and would perhaps coming. And again, like if there's an element to which I've done this in the past, I don't know other people, in mysteries, sometimes you can just kind of blind guess who the baddie is from sort of where they turn up in the novel and kind of what actions they're given, because that's what the genre expects. And I just didn't want the idea that people could blind guess my novel because they know the genre particularly well, whether they know time travel particularly well or Christie sort of golden age mysteries very well. So yeah, there was a lot of that. So yeah, no, the ending was definitely considered, just not by me.
Well, I'm glad you walked away from that, because I mean, obviously, if I figured that out, then that would have been something that I think others would figure out. And the ending is totally brilliant that you have. So kudos to you for going to a different publisher.
And Diana and I love a book when we read a book that we can obsess over and we can like bounce theories off each other, because we have extensive text threads about this book, trying to figure out things or analyze things. And I even went back and reread both scenes where Ravencourt was playing chess with Evelyn. When Belle was watching it, and then when he actually was playing as Ravencourt, I was like, I wonder if that's like something like what moves they make and what chess pieces they use. Is that a clue? So I went back and
I think it was actually a clue. Like the chess game was initially a lot more detailed than it became, but it was more the idea of like both of them playing chess with Evelyn was the bit that I liked, and the kind of how uncomfortable the game made one and how close it brought the other one. So through Belle, it's a game like they don't sit down and play, but she wanted to play and he knows the game. And through that, they find a bridge and they find respect. But the idea that Ravencourt actually plays her and loses was very, very interesting to me. And that's just a very subtle thing about the future of the book, that people are all playing chess against Evelyn and they're all going to lose, like basically, and they've always lost in this loop, because she is the chess grandmaster in this house, as it's finally revealed.
So, and then talking about, I mean, we've talked about Aiden a lot, but Anna is another character that, she pushes the story along, and without her, I don't think Aiden would have had much of a chance to kind of get any kind of upper hand. I feel like he always would have been playing catch up, but knowing the two kind of prisons that they were stuck in, which for you was the more challenging, where Anna was waking up from scratch every day and she had to piece it together, or Aiden, who kind of got little bits and pieces as he went, but he was still had some memory?
Oh, Anna. I mean, the entire point, the idea that when you get to the end of the book that you discover this isn't fair at all. Like, this isn't, it's rigged against Anna completely. She could never escape. And I think Aiden says that in the final chapter when he's arguing with the plague doctor about getting Anna out. It's like, she will never escape. Like, the idea was that they can't escape without each other. So they have personality traits that they each need to get out of the house. They both have skills that each need. Like, Anna is ruthless as anything. And I love that about her. I love the fact that in most instances, the way she gets to solve a problem is the most direct way. Like, she's the one who suggests, well, why don't we just kill Evelyn? And then we kill her, and then we can solve it, and then maybe we get out that way. Like, the idea that some people, I think, were kind of slightly shocked by who Anna turns out to be at the end of the book. And I can absolutely understand that. But I also do feel that, like, her personality is layered through the book. So even though she's changed, that fundamental core of who she is, this sort of like cold-blooded pragmatism, it's evident all the way through the novel, and Aiden makes use of it. So like, it's one of those very strange things that it destroyed his life, and then he ends up relying on exactly the same skill that perhaps made her the monster she was outside Blackheath. So I think the entire book, I mean, to write, I found Anna quite difficult because I knew who she was and I knew what she would have to become, and I didn't want to entirely separate her from that character. But at the same time, I had to make her at least a bit likable. I had to make, but while making her still at heart a bit of a cold-blooded bastard.
Well, and then just going back to what you said about not wanting to be, not wanting to be predictable just based on the genre, or being able to identify, the villains and the heroes. I was really upset when Daniel turned out to be a villain.
Oh yeah.
I liked him so much. I loved that he was helping Aiden, and he at least had, like, I wasn't too sure about Anna. Like, I was kind of on the fence about who she was and what role she would play. But Daniel, I thought, was such a good ally, and then not so much at all.
Whereas I'm the complete opposite of Michelle, and I feel like I have a mental problem where I love the villains.
Right.
And I absolutely love Daniel even more once we got to see his true nature. I was just like, yes, he's the best.
But the idea was always that everybody in the house has a plan, right? So they're all acting according to their natures, which is the thing the plague doctor points out has been the big obstacle to getting out of the house. That they're all trapped by their own natures. They're all always trapped by the fact that every time their memory gets wiped, they act according to the way that they would always act. So Daniel is this charmer. This is what he does. He will always, in every loop, work out very early doors that the best way to get out of this is to pretend to be Aiden's best friend, to feed him information that will lead him astray or will help him. Yay! Cat interruption!
Always at the worst possible time.
And then, yeah, so like, I love that about him. I love the way that his way of solving this mystery. And then you had Anna, who would, like, shoot her way out of it if she could. You had the footman, who would, like, he looks like the big bad guy of the piece, but actually turns out to be a pawn, to go back to our chess metaphor. I mean, that is the thing, isn't it? Like, if you play chess, or even if you come near chess, actually pawns end up doing a lot of damage on the board, but they're nothing. They're almost entirely useless, disposable pieces, and that's what my footman was. So yeah, the Daniel thing was he was just a different flavour of bad guy, and the book needed him desperately. And it also needed another character who was semi-expositional, who could just occasionally step in and explain some of the rules of this world, or maybe lie about some of the rules of this world, or because also at the beginning of the book, there is no one nice in it. Like, the book is just riddled with unpleasant people doing unpleasant things. And I was like, well, maybe if I throw someone nice in, I can make them a bit horrible later on, and that's kind of what I did. So he served, like everything in this book, he had 2 or 3 roles to play.
And what are? I lost my list of questions. Hold, please. So, what were some of the challenges of creating these secondary characters? Because you're seeing them through the eyes of our protagonists and their hosts. So you're not necessarily learning who they are. You're seeing them as perceived by other people. Like for Evelyn, you know, in one host, she's seen as sympathetic, and another one she's scared, another one she's mean. And, you know, even us as people, we all have so many different facets of our personalities, but you singled them out one at a time and kind of showed just how complex your people can be and your characters could be. What was it difficult to kind of like break that down into layers?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you point out the idea about we're all different, because that's actually my starting point for that. I realized, well, not realized, it's obvious, but we're all very different people with all the people in our lives. So that I know my wife doesn't see me or ascribes to me different traits actually than my parents even would. And then again, that my best friends would. Just thought that'd be really interesting to explore. And again, when you've got a novel like this that is one part Agatha Christie drawing room mystery, another part sci-fi novel, another part fantasy novel, you give yourself the biggest canvas ever to play with. Like, you've got so much space you can seep out into the corners of. You've got so much you can explore, so much you can talk about, almost at the detriment of the novel in the first 30 drafts, because I kept getting it wrong. I kept focusing more on sci-fi or the, you know, the body swapping more than I was focusing on the murder mystery, which was always supposed to be the heart of it. So yeah, that idea that you would see Evelyn from all the different perspectives, and that you would get to see a lot of the characters from like very different angles, but principally her, because again, it's the 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. The idea was always 7.5 deaths. Sorry, where you are. The idea was always that like you're trained to think of her as a victim. She's just the victim, and that's what Agatha Christie does. Like, you kill a character, they are the victim. That's set in stone. That's what they are for the entire novel. And usually they have your sympathy simply because they died. Like, they die, you feel bad for them. But with Evelyn, I got to do more than that. I got to explore. She got to be a fully rounded, perhaps the most rounded character in the house. She got to have motivations. You got to see her in action before the day ended. That was just fascinating to me, just to do that, just to make, like, you're going to pity this woman because she died, and you're wrong to do that. You shouldn't do that. You should immediately feel bad about doing that, because actually she's many, many different things to many, many different people. And she has motivation in this world. She has drive in this world. She's up to something, like absolutely everyone in this. So yeah, I mean, you could call this not equally the 7 plots of Evelyn Hardcastle, the 7 schemes of Evelyn Hardcastle. Like, she's got so much to do apart from just die.
And she was a busy girl in her last day.
Oh yeah, like, I mean, there's a culmination of her like long held plan, right? Like, she was just, and you're just like stepping in at the end, and I feel so sorry for her. Like, she just, in life, the real Evelyn Hardcastle got away with all this sort of stuff, you know. She carefully laid the groundwork, and then she probably did just sod off. Like, she probably had a perfectly nice life, but all of a sudden you've got a time traveling detective on your case. You can't possibly beat that. It's really unfair.
Yes. Well, I love that you brought up the point a little earlier that at the start of each day, they were brought back to who they really were, like their true nature. And this leads into a really great observation that Michele had, where she was saying at the core of this book, it dissects the essence of destiny versus free will, because we see a change in Anna and even in Aiden, and Aiden's is even more I guess obvious to us as the reader, because we don't know who Anna is until the very end. But you see Aiden, you know, there's points where he remembers little bits of every life. You know, and it's just, I think that really, even though this is a murder mystery, I feel like that's really the true theme of the book. And I kind of feel like I took away some of Michelle's thunder since it was her observation. Sorry, Michele.
No, it's fine. It's just, sometimes I get a little philosophical while I'm writing my questions, and all of a sudden I write like 2 paragraphs, which aren't a question at all. And I'm like, that's an observation. We're just going to
That's exactly what I do in the book, though. Like, I'd have an entire page where I'm like, actually, that's just philosophical pondering. That's not getting anyone closer to the plot. That's just me having a little think. And all of those things ultimately became 1 paragraph or became 1 sentence. Like, they all stuck in there. I just tried to whittle them down to the core of what they were. But in the end, like, the philosophy of this book became a huge part of it. And that idea of free will versus determinism was massive, because he's fundamentally fighting the very thing he has to do. Like, Evelyn Hardcastle, it says on the back of the book, Evelyn Hardcastle will die. She will die at the end of this day. And very early on, and all he has to do is work out who killed her to escape. And very early on, at the beginning of the book, he's just like, well, I don't want that to happen. And I love the idea of a character just setting themselves in opposition to the entire world, to absolutely everything, to all common sense, to all reason. He just stands there and says, this will not be, this will not happen. And that's tested at every page, every conversation, every other character tests that. They urge him to back away from it. They urge him to go with the flow of the day. They tell him that the day can't be changed, and he begins to believe it. And the fundamental truth of him is that the day is only the way it is because of who his personality and what it is. Like, because he keeps making the same decisions and same mistakes over and over and over again, the day keeps going the same way. And I think that's, for me, that was the heart of determinism versus free will, that it looks determined because of who we are, because our personality is more often than not set in stone by a certain age, and given the same option 3 times, we'll make the same mistake because our mind will ultimately drift to a certain thing. So his free will basically comes out when he changes his fundamental nature, when he begins to realize that if he is a different person, if he fundamentally believes a different thing, which must be the hardest thing in the world for a human being to do, the day changes around him. And that is, again, it's just, for me, that's just what life is. That is just the way we're all living. We can all change anything at any point, but mostly we don't because of who we are. Like, the flaw is in us. It's not in the world. It's not in time. It's not in entropy or chaos. It's us. All the flaws are ours.
So now when we got to, we're actually not really spoiling the ending, I'm noticing. We're still kind of like skirting. But when
throw a rock at it, just go for it right now, just smash it to pieces.
So usually when I'm reading a book that I really like, I'll flip to the last page because the last page is usually safe, and I'll read the last paragraph because I just want to know who's still alive and which characters like made it through, because I don't want to invest any more than I already have in certain characters.
Oh.
But I was so afraid to flip to the end of this book, like even accidentally. I didn't want to flip open and read a word and have the whole ending ruined. But the fact that it was a prison for them, and it was a jail sentence, and only one of them could have gotten. So basically, with the exception of Aiden, these were all bad people. They had all done something terrible. And this was the only way that they could possibly escape. But for all of them, except Aiden, they were employing the skills and the traits that had gotten them into the prison in the first place to get out of it. So they really weren't rehabilitating at all.
No.
Except for maybe Anna, I guess, slightly.
But again, only through her relationship with Aiden. So the fact that and again, that comes down to the fundamental, what I believe is like the free will versus determinism argument about changing your fundamental nature. I don't think you can do that on your own. I think that requires the force of will of another person. It requires that interaction with another person. It requires you to change on their behalf, but truly change. So yeah, I think Anna, it's as you say, like Anna is the only other person who actually does change. And that's because she has this relationship with Aiden that is so intense. I mean, it starts as absolute loathing and hate and torture. They destroyed each other. And then when they begin to depend on each other, they can fundamentally alter who each other is. And that's what equips them with the skills to escape. But without that weird relationship of theirs, neither of them would have got out. Which again, that's just a concept that I really, really enjoy, that they're both massively flawed characters. They both need fundamental changes to who they are. And that only comes about by leaning on this other person. It's a really weird marriage of sorts.
It is, but I loved it. And it's so funny because, speaking of the ending, I love how the ending is open, where we don't know what happens to them. I mean, one of my favorite short stories was always The Lady and the Tiger. Which one does the guy choose at the end of that short story? Which door? Is it the one with the lady, or is it the one with the tiger? And I love those open endings. Meanwhile, Michele was completely
like, I text Diana and I said, okay, I should probably find the thread and post it on our Instagram to show what our discussion was when I finished the book, because I finished the book after she did. And I was like, I have questions. So do they end up getting the memories back at the end? Do they hate each other? what did Anna do? Like, why did she kill so many people? Why was she awful? What did she do? So did you kind of know, or were you just, did you leave it open-ended for yourself as well?
No, I know the answers to all of them. Again, the point was that it wasn't the story I was telling. The moment I carried on and explained that stuff to you, I started telling a sci-fi novel. It became about the world beyond Blackheath. And this wasn't a story about the world beyond Blackheath. I had to talk about that stuff because I had to explain how they ended up in the house. This novel is about the murder mystery. It's about who killed Evelyn Hardcastle in Blackheath. And all of that other stuff about who she killed, why she did it, the underpinnings of this house as a prison, the people who are the plague doctor's bosses and who he's so afraid of. That's a sci-fi novel. That's somewhere else. Like, that would be an entirely different story to tell. And also, I generally think if I give you those answers, I think the book loses a lot of potency. I think what you get is, I think it would be unsatisfying. It would be like squeezing all the sausage meat out of the sausage. It would just be like, it feels like a checklist ending. And what I wanted to do was, there is a lot of ambiguity about this book. There's a lot of ambiguity in the personalities and the tropes. Like, does this stuff hold once they get out of the house? Like, are they really, really changed? That would be really stuff. That would be amazing to explore elsewhere, but only if I could turn it into another equally interesting novel. But that wasn't my intention. I'm not baiting myself for a sequel here. Like, I have no intention of writing a sequel to this at all. It wasn't part of the core story I was telling, so I didn't go into it. But I equally understand, because a lot of people told me that they found that incredibly frustrating, or that they hated the end. But like, again, I feel satisfied because I'm like, that's the story I chose to tell. Like, I purposely did that.
No, I didn't hate the ending at all. I don't want you to think that. I'm very, like, I need facts. Maybe that's the journalist in me. Like, I need to know the answers to all the questions. And so I'll just email you separately, and
yeah.
and then you can tell me, and then I'll be happy.
Yeah, sure, go for it. I will. You've got to sign the NDA, and then
absolutely, it will not be disclosed on any of our social medias. It'll just be from my personal. Because I need to,
from your personal email, because I don't want to know. I have my own theories. I am perfectly happy in my own little imaginary world. You two discuss it. It's perfectly okay.
That's what's really interesting about it, is that there are, like, the reading of this book has turned up two very different readers, and they are you two. It's the person who can get to the end of the book and be like, I'm satisfied with the story as it was told, and this other stuff for me is garnish. I don't need it. I'd rather just, if you'd gone into that, I would have felt, like you diluted the book. Whereas again, the other opposite, where people are just like, well, you started telling me a story and I feel you've only half told me the story. And that's something, and weirdly, naively, I didn't expect that. I honestly didn't expect that would divvy up readers the way it has. So it's been fascinating to see, especially when you get, like, on Amazon, you get your 1-star review, and it's like, I love this book, I hated the ending, 1 star. And you're like,
wait a minute, what?
It's a 500-page book.
Couldn't you give me at least a few more stars per like 100 pages or so? I mean, come on now.
I know, exactly. But it's, again, I remember when I was in university, one of my professors told me that when you're writing an essay, the only things that actually matter are the first paragraph and the last paragraph. Because that's all that people remember. Like, the first paragraph, like, the professor will read and be like, okay, this guy knows what he's doing, he knows where he's going. And the final paragraph, because that's what will stay with them when they put it down, and you effectively get marked on 2 paragraphs out of an entire essay. So I just feels very much like this is what this book, it happened with this book. It's 500 pages, but all anybody cares about is the first paragraph and the last paragraph.
No, definitely. I mean, please don't think I hated the ending, because I did not.
No, I think you hate the ending. I'm going to go away and I'm going to tell all my friends.
We invite you on the show, and then we have Michelle tell you she hates the ending. I'm sorry.
I hated your characters. I hated the words.
No,
Michelle, you were so rude.
It was just sabotage. That's the word I'm looking for. I forgot my words for a minute.
Right. Okay. Not the song by the Beastie Boys, presumably.
No. And just speaking of the world, so Blackheath Estate, did you create, was that kind of inspired by something, or was that completely out of your imagination?
It's a composite. So the house itself, I'm English, obviously. This isn't just an
I thought
accent.
you were from New York. I thought that was a New York accent. Really, I couldn't tell that you were English.
Oh no, yeah, I'm secretly from Brooklyn. No, it's one of those strange things where I'm incredibly English, but there's there's a level of Englishness to me that surprises myself. Like there's a depth of Englishness within me that is untapped, a reservoir of English Britishness. And so country houses are part of that. Like they're everywhere here. Like you walk down the street and you bump into a 700-year-old country house. Like people live in Tudor houses. Like it's part of who we are. So you grow up with a familiarity with that world, with the class system, with those types of houses. So that was innate. It's not a particular house. I arranged the layout according to what my plot needed. So those rooms, I knew all that sort of stuff would be in the house, and then I sort of organized it according to my plot and what was required. But for the atmosphere, I actually went and stayed in a couple of manor houses overnight because I'd never really done that in the past. And what's really interesting is I tried to go to a couple in England, but now there's such tourist attractions that are incredibly expensive to do. So I couldn't really afford it. So I ended up going to the south of France, of all places, and I went and stayed in a place there called the Manoir de Villiers, which is a French, it's a French manor house, obviously. But I think it's from the 1600s. So it's incredibly beautiful, but it's incredibly tumble down and ramshackle. And the owners, they're a really elderly French couple. They've got titles, but they're dirt poor. And they rent out rooms in their house to people just to keep their place going. And it's like one of those amazing, lovely places, but you've got to be not such a fan of hot water, or like you've got to deal with drafts, or like if you like your electricity to be on like 100% of the time, this probably isn't for you. It was perfect for my story. So I went there and I rented a room, and I kind of expected it to be like a B&B or like an Airbnb type thing. It wasn't. I just got there. There was nobody else there. It was this huge manor house, and they just handed me my keys and were just like, "There's the key to the front door. There's the key to your room. Bye-bye." And I got it for the weekend. So it was just bewildering. I would spend the night I had a little candle. There was all the lights were off, so I'd have a little candle. I would kind of creep around this old house with my candle, and all the darkness and all the shadows, and everything would creak and groan. It was one of those houses where you step on a step and the entire house kind of makes a noise. It was incredible. So, I mean, a lot of the atmosphere and a lot of the sense of darkness and gloom and space and anything you may feel that's gothic-y, kind of a lot of it comes from that experience. But I tried to do that with everything. Like I went for the first chapter where he gets lost in the forest. I went and got myself lost in a forest for a couple of hours. I left my phone in the car and just wandered off because I wanted always to try and have fun while I was writing the book. Because otherwise, I'm just sat in front of a computer writing a book, and that can get incredibly tedious.
I don't know if I have a terrible sense of direction where I can, if I don't go out of a parking lot the same way that I went in, I'll probably turn the wrong way to get home. So I probably couldn't get lost in a forest because I really would get lost in the forest.
Mate, I was absolutely lost in the forest. Like I have a terrible sense of direction as well. Like what I expected to do was so I parked up on the side of the road. I left my phone in the glove compartment of my car. So I was like, I just want to and what I planned to do was walk for sort of like 15 to 20 minutes into the center of the forest, turn myself around 360, and then just like kind of walk out. But I figured that in my head, I just figured if you walk a straight line in and then walk a straight line out, eventually you'll get to a road. The roads are all streets, so I just have to walk back down the road to get to my car. What's the worst that could happen? 2 hours later, I emerged in like a field, like I imagine a farmer's field with like cows and a bull and like all this sort of stuff. And I have no clue where I am. It was the stupidest thing I've ever done in my entire life. And it was getting dark and it was just horrible. I ended up like traipsing down this road at sort of 9 o'clock at night, just trying to walk back to my car. It was idiotic. But yeah, it was fun.
And a bit brave, because I never did that. I've had friends who've gotten lost in the desert. So yeah. I would never do the get lost in the woods thing. At least, especially now without my phone. I get lost. I get lost in my house.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, like the desert, if you get lost in the desert, you die immediately.
Yeah.
If you get lost in a forest in England, you're never going to be, we could cross the island in about 7 minutes. So like, it's not as terrible as I made it sound. Like you're always going to be able to find your way out to something eventually.
Yeah, and you guys don't have mountain lions in your forests, so there's that.
No, exactly. Or any sort of like aggressive creature. We've got some slightly snappy foxes, but fundamentally we're okay.
Yeah. I remember one time my sister and I went hiking, and I swear we didn't make it very far because we saw the signs. We went to an area that had mountain lions. It was the first time she and I had hiked in an area that actually had mountain lions. And you hear, for hikers, you hear all the stories about what you're supposed to do with mountain lions and stuff. And we're like, okay, it was kind of very lions and tigers and bears, oh my. As we're like walking through, and the wind was going through at like such a perfect angle that it was making some of the trees sound like doors slowly closing, where the hinges are squeaky.
Nice.
And it was, we were getting that sound, and finally she and I just looked at each other. We're like, nope, we can't do this. We can't. We like turned around and walked back through because I would. And I think that also explains why the opening scene where he's running through the woods lost just gripped me in the novel so much.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I mean, that was part of the reason why I did it, was because I was struggling with that opening chapter. It wasn't coming together at all. Like it wasn't. It felt for months and months and months. It was massively overwritten. It was and that's my habit, and that's awful. But when I'm stuck, I just keep writing instead of sort of like trying to work out what I'm saying. I will just gild the lily over and over and over again. So instead of it being like this guy who's frightened and he's lost in the woods, it was this guy being like, and I was lost in the woods, oh my. Oh, what a terrible circumstance. I wondered how I would ever come out of it. Do you know what I mean? It was just like it was him and Byron taking a walk through the woods. So that's part of the reason why I had that experience, because it was like, well, if I just go and live it, I'll just write things down on my notepad, which I also did as I went through. And then I came back with that scene effectively written. Apart from I didn't see anyone murdered. But the rest of it was pretty much there.
Apart from the plague doctor and the other host coming in to creepily put a compass in your pocket and give you the direction.
Yeah, I think at some point I was praying for someone to give me a compass. I think that would have been a way. Or especially like the hour 3 or whatever it was of walking down the road. It was like, why hasn't someone do that? Just to be like, what are you doing? You're an idiot. Go that way.
Or, if it had been me, it would have been, I finally saw someone to ask for directions and they would have been like, oh, it's right there. Like literally in the corner.
That would have been, I think I probably had visions about that as well, because you're semi-embarrassed, but then massively happy that you're just going to go home anyway. But I like 2-hour period, all I had was like a Snickers bar as well in my pocket. So I was just like, this is rubbish. I'm never doing this again.
But at least it was a Snickers bar.
Yeah, exactly.
Or at least you can get to the point where you start rationing out the Snickers bar to last you. Days.
Or when you're praying for rain so you can have a drink and just like sticking your tongue out to the drops.
So I know we're just about at our hour now, but are you able to tell us about what you're working on next for your next book?
I am not, but only because it's due the 1st of March. So I'm turning it into my publisher in 3 weeks. And then there's going to be a year of edits on it effectively before it comes out. So it's slated to come out in March 2020. So actually be 6 months of edit. And as I said, I find a lot in the edit. So I find a lot in sort of post writing. So anything I tell you now feels like it might be a lie by the time it actually comes out. And then I just look like I lied to you after such a nice chat on camera. I would feel terrible about doing that. So I'm just going to keep stum. I'll just say,
I mean, you are a mystery writer, so I kind of expect the red herring to be thrown in there. So you could totally be like, oh, it's this high-end fantasy novel. And it's like completely the opposite. So I would expect that and not be angry.
With the way I sort of roam through genres, it's probably going to end up having a bit of high-end fantasy in there anyway. It's just, Yeah, but no, it's going to be another. It is another murder mystery. It's got another body at the centre of it, but it's an entirely different kettle of fish. There's no time loops. There's no body swapping. There's none of that sort of stuff. It's going to be, but it should be big and fun and ridiculous, and hopefully a bit different to everything else that's out there.
So we'll just schedule you for March 2020 then to come back.
Well, absolutely. Now that I've worked out how my camera works and sound and technology, like it should be a doddle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. It was so much fun to kind of pick your brain and ask all of our burning questions.
No, thank you very much for having me. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm so sorry I was late in today.
Oh, no,
no problem at all.
The kids aren't even here. They're out of friends playing, so it was nice to sit down and have an adult conversation for an hour.
With us? Are you sure that's what just happened? Or are you about to do it?
Well, semi-adult, adolescent.
Yeah. Anything above Paw Patrol.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I didn't have to, sometimes you do end up talking about plot twists about Paw Patrol or like Mickey and the Roadster Racers. And, there's only so many seasons you can watch before the same thing starts happening.
I've got all that ahead of me. I've got a 7-month-old daughter, so I am.
Wait.
Yeah, I am. I can't wait until she's just sit in front of the television. At very least, at the moment, she's just crawling around, being an absolute nightmare.
When you're watching the same episode for like 3 hours straight.
Right. Okay. But you've got a phone. Surely you can just sneakily watch Netflix on your phone in the background.
Well, I tried that, and then my daughter goes, "Mom, I want you to watch with me."
Like,
Fun.
God, children are the worst. I swear. Nobody mentioned this before we got pregnant. Nobody was like, why are you having a kid? Honestly, they're the worst. Your life will be ruined. It'll be in tatters.
It's the dirty secret that no one tells you until you're part of the club.
Yeah. Now you're miserable as well. Ha ha ha.
Then you really learn to appreciate your dependency on coffee and wine. See, it's 3 o'clock. Well, now almost 4:30 in the afternoon here. So I was kind of in that gray area of coffee and wine. Like, is it too late for coffee? Is it too early for wine? So I had coffee. And Diana, being the good friend that she is.
And the alcoholic.
What are you doing? You need to drink wine. So I switched.
Well, 'cause I won't feel like I'm getting the full experience unless you're both the wine included in the Wine Women podcast.
Exactly. Thank you. We're good hosts.
Live up to our name. It's very important to us.
Mm-hmm. We have a brand, Michelle. It's called being drunk all the time.
So do you have our next book with you, Diane? I have mine, but it's also over there.
It's downstairs.
Okay, hold on. I'll get it then. Mine is closer. Oh. All right. So our next book is The Kingdom of Copper, which is book 2 in the City of Brass trilogy. If any of you remember reading it last
July. This past July, actually, yeah.
So grab your copy, start reading it. If you haven't read City of Brass, do that and start the second one. And come back on Thursday and we'll have another episode. Mm-hmm. All right, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's fun talking with you.
Thank you, me too. It was brilliant. Everybody enjoy the next book. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.